The Washington Post is out with a headline that reads, Sessions, the Attorney General, spoke twice with Russian ambassador during Trump's presidential campaign, justice officials say.
Hold it now.
Senator Al Franken calling on Attorney General Jeff Sessions to recuse himself immediately after the Justice Department reveals that he met twice with a Russian ambassador last year while he was a Trump campaign advisor. However, Senator Sessions failed to disclose that during his confirmation process in response to a question from Senator Franken. Here is the exchange.
If there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do?
Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
There cannot be even the scintilla of doubt about the impartiality and fairness of the Attorney General, the top law enforcement official of the land. After this, it's clear Attorney General Sessions does not meet that test. Because the Department of Justice should be above reproach for the good of the country, Attorney General Sessions should resign.
Why is Jeff Sessions in his confirmation hearings not being truthful with Al Franken, especially at a time when all of the background discussion, the backdrop in the discourse against those hearings was Russian intervention in U.S. elections? So it's not like it wouldn't have just occurred to him, or he would have completely forgotten that he met with the Russian ambassador in the United States. And by the way, you know, to say this is because of his capacity as a senator in the Armed Services Committee, certainly you can say that. But then why did no other member of the Armed Services Committee meet with the Russian ambassador?
You know what's interesting, Amanda, is that President Trump has declared several times that Russia is fake news. Anything having to do with Russia is fake news. And he's right in the sense that when it comes to Michael Flynn and now Attorney General Sessions, they have been saying things that were fake news, at least according to their critics. They have been saying things that were not true. Flynn was not honest with Vice President Pence, and now many members of the Senate Judiciary Committee think that Senator Sessions, now Attorney General Sessions, was not honest with them.
Did you meet with the Russians? And your unequivocal answer was, no, I did not meet with the Russians. That is 100% untrue. So hence, we have perjury.
Judge, what do you make of that?
Well, I'm glad you ran the entire question and the entire answer, because it shows the context, as you say, of the environment at that moment. It appears from the question, from the answer, and from the Attorney General's explanation just a few minutes ago, that he interpreted the question to mean, did you talk to the Russians as a surrogate for the campaign about the campaign? And the answer was no. The question wasn't, did you ever talk to Russians at any time during the campaign? Now, the public can decide for themselves, because you just ran the entire thing, if the answer was truthful. And if the then Senator Sessions' interpretation of the question was a fair one on the basis of the context. I happen to think it was, but the public will decide for themselves. This is not the type of case where a person is prosecuted for perjury, because in order to succeed in a perjury prosecution, you have to exclude all probable and reasonable lawful interpretations, and the one we've just given is a probable and reasonable lawful one.
Right now, Russia responding to all of this breaking news, saying when it comes to the controversy swirling around the Attorney General, well, in the meetings with the Russian ambassador, it is not their, quote, headache. Keep in mind, according to current and former U.S. officials, U.S. intelligence considers Ambassador Kislyak a Russian spy master.
I want to bring in CNN senior international correspondent Matthew Chance, who is in Moscow. Matthew, you just got finished interviewing the spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry. I am sure she had some interesting perspective on what's going on here today.
Yeah, she did, and she, along with other Russian officials, are not happy at all with the way this political situation is developing in the United States. Toxic hysteria is what they're calling it. The idea that Russia intervened in some way in the U.S. elections. They're rejecting that, of course. Specifically, the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, pushed back strongly on the idea that the Russian ambassador to the United States, Sergei Kislyak, was in any way related to espionage. Take a listen to what she said.
I mean, Mr. Kislyak is a well-known, world-class diplomat who was a deputy minister of foreign affairs in Russia, who was communicated with his American colleagues through decades on different fields. And CNN accused him of being a Russian spy, recruiting.
Well, it was U.S. officials that accused him of that.
Stop spreading lie and false news. This is a good advice for CNN.
Are you concerned that the investigations into Russia are going to turn up more secret meetings?
Please stop spreading lie and false news.
Mr. Attorney General, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you.
So here's the timeline as I understand it. On January 10th, you were asked during your confirmation hearings by Senator Franken if you'd had any contact with the Russians, and you took that to mean in your capacity as a surrogate for the Trump campaign. And then a little over 2 weeks later, Mike Flynn was forced to resign because of conversations he had with that very same Russian ambassador. And so my question is, from that point, February 13th until now, why did no one on your staff come to you and say, hey, we had conversations with the Russian ambassador, perhaps we should amend our statement to the Senate in order to avoid the problems that Mike Flynn had?
Well, Tucker, the question that came to me was from Senator Franken, and he went into a great length saying that day some new story had come out and said that various Trump surrogates were meeting continually with Russian officials as part of the campaign. And he raised that question with me, and my answer went straight to that. It's the first time I had heard that, so I focused on that I had not had any such meetings, was not meeting with Russian officials on a continuing basis to advance any campaign agenda. Sometime before that, I had met in my office in an official way with the Russian ambassador, and so that was the answer I gave, and I think it was an honest answer, Tucker. I thought I was responding exactly to that question, and it really became a big brouhaha, and I was glad to have the chance to kind of respond today and explain it.
I guess my question, I understand all that, and I take you at your word that you meant that you had not contacted or had any contact with the Russian government or its representatives in your capacity as an advisor to the Trump campaign. My point, though, again, is that a little over 2 weeks later, the National Security Advisor has to resign because of conversations that he had, also in his capacity as a non-surrogate for the campaign, with the very same ambassador. So did anyone on your staff say to you, holy smokes, perhaps we should clarify this, because you could see how it could be a problem?
No, I never gave that a thought, never considered it. I don't believe anyone ever mentioned that to me. In quite different circumstances to me, Tucker, unrelated.
Now, in response to a political hit piece from the Washington Post and the onslaught of attacks that followed from Democrats, well, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is now recusing himself from all Russia election investigations. Let's take a look.
Let me be clear. I never had meetings with Russian operatives or Russian intermediaries about the Trump campaign. And the idea that I was part of a, quote, continuing exchange of information during the campaign between Trump surrogates and intermediaries for the Russian government is totally false. I asked for their candid an honest opinion about what I should do about investigations, certain investigations. And my staff recommended recusal. They said that since I had involvement with the campaign, I should not be involved in any campaign investigation. I have studied the rules and considered their comments and evaluation. I believe those recommendations are right and just. Therefore, I have recused myself in the matters that deal with the Trump campaign.
I think what we're seeing is a lot of political theater. Could Jeff have been more clear in what he said? Yes. I think that was unfortunate, but I think context matters a lot. Jeff was being asked about the Trump campaign communicating with the Russians. I think he understood that he was answering it in that capacity, and that is perfectly understandable. And the reason I say it's political theater is the underlying meeting. You know, this morning everyone's in high dudgeon about this meeting. The underlying meeting is a nothing burger. It's what senators do every day, meeting with foreign ambassadors. That's part of the job, and Jeff was a very hard-working senator. He'll be a very hard-working attorney general, and so I think everyone's getting all worked up because it's a chance to beat up the attorney general and beat up the president. But I think the underlying meeting is simply doing his job.
I know it's time like a president to work shit out.
And you heard Peter say that there are calls already from Democrats that Secretary Sessions should resign. I mean, even Nancy Pelosi. I want to read you the quote from her statement. Attorney General Sessions lies to the Senate and to the American people, make him unfit to serve as the chief law enforcement officer of our country. He must resign immediately. This seems far too much for where this all is at this point, is it not?
It does. Look, I think my friends on the other side of the aisle are having a hard time figuring out why they lost the election. They lost the election because they had a flawed candidate and they ran a bad campaign. And they're having a difficult time coming to grips with that. There's no evidence that the Trump campaign did anything inappropriate. There's frankly no convincing evidence that the Russians were successful in impacting the election. They certainly did appear to have tried to tamper with it to some degree. And there's just no evidence, again, that Jeff Sessions did anything at all wrong. He might not have communicated as fully or clearly as he should have, but he's set the record straight. He's told us what happened, and he's made sure that he won't be part of any investigation that might need to occur in the future. I don't know what else you could ask him to do.
Russia. Look, I don't know, again, where this evidence of anything is. Please, let's have a hearing. Have as long as you want, well, within reason, because you're trying to, I know what you're doing. You're merely trying to justify or to call into question the legitimacy of Trump's ascension, his apotheosis, his canonization and beatification and elevation and the like. And what you're doing is you're doing something also to explain again why Hillary Clinton lost. So fine. So far there has been from no one, no evidence whatsoever of anything of any kind of Russian. Show me!